All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our quarter revision meeting. Roll call. We have councillors. I think Deputy Mayor Bicketti's on his way, or is he here? Oh, he's on a quarter revision. Okay, all members are present for their quarter revision. And the land acknowledgement. I can get this here going. We acknowledge that we are on land surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties agreements between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, Lenni, Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi, Huron-Wendat people, and the Caldwell First Nation. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving towards forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit and Métis. And to the quarter revision, any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Jobin.
Yes, and through you, I would just like to make note that I will not be voting or having any discussion on any matters pertaining to the Sullivan Creek drain, as we are assessed as landowners towards that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll have that duly noted. Thanks for the notice. Yep, we're good. So the introduction purpose of our meeting is to hear from affected owners who wish to appeal his or her assessment on the Shuttleworth drain or any part thereof as set out in the drainage report prepared by Rude Engineering, Inc. That was dated on December 14th, 2022, or the Sullivan Creek drain or any part thereof and set out in the drainage report prepared by Rude Engineering, and that was dated January 9th, 2023. And I will turn it over to our drainage superintendent. If there's any further background you would like to bring forward to the quarter revision.
Thank you, Your Worship. On February 28th of 2023, Council approved the technical aspects of the drainage report at the meeting to consider and provisionally adopted bylaw 2023-027 for the Shuttleworth drain. One landowner registered to be a delegate and brought their concerns forward at that meeting. Since the meeting to consider, no landowners have reached out to me with any questions or concerns. One delegate, Ms. Forte, correct me if I'm mispronouncing that, has registered as a delegate tonight to appeal their assessment set out in the report. Mr. Gerard Rude from Rude Engineering is also joining us virtually to answer any questions that the COR or the delegate may have. Thank you.
That's my fault. Mr. Rude, is there anything else that you would want to bring forward at this time?
Got to unmute my microphone through you, Mr. Mayor. We received questions through the drainage department on some of the assessments and works that were being provided and changes that occurred to pricing between the 2022 report and the current report that's out there. And we believe we properly addressed all those questions. And I don't see any reasons for making any adjustments to the assessment schedule by the Court of Revision for this particular report.
Okay. Thank you. Then I'll open it up to our delegations. And first we have Victoria Forte and is an affected property owner who's on the Shuttleworth drain. Ms. Forte?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Victoria Forte here with my husband, Adam. I also have my brother-in-law, Emil Naboud, who is also a neighbor. And I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, but I just want to get this across and I am not in agreement with this project. However, I did review the report, as it is very important to us. And with this bridge, we feel that it's overpriced. We looked at the estimated costs and they're very inconsistent and they've increased significantly since that initial report, which we received in February of 2022. And we just don't see an apparent reason for this cost increase. And I'm just going to support some details to support, present you some details to support this claim. In that initial report that we received in February of 2022, our projected cost was $16,100. And that was for 32 meters of plastic pipe. On the latest estimate that we just received, it's now 35.8 meters of pipe and the cost has gone up to $21,800. Considering the work description, we observed that in addition to the increased pipe, there's also a 600 by 600 millimeter square concrete catch basin that's been added. So we do see that that's been added to the work. This $5,700 charge corresponds to an additional 3.5 meters of pipe and the catch basin. So looking at the per meter price that we were looking at from last year, the price that we should get from the length increase would be $1,750. And then that catch basin would account for the rest of the money, which is $3,950. So if you break it down this way, that kind of covers the cost increase. However, if you compare the situation that I'm in with my neighbors who have the identical work, the breakdown is very much different. There's no consistency across the neighbors. And if you can look, we looked at the pipe comparison. So for example, some are paying $472 per meter, whereas we're paying $608 per meter. So it's $150 more per meter for the identical work. So if you look at the work description, it's identical, but our price is significantly higher. And I just want to know why are we being charged for what appears to be the same work? Why is the pipe length increase? And why is there such a significant cost increase between this last year's report and this one? The $30,950 for the catch basin seems a little bit extreme. In addition, after reviewing the report, I did find some errors. And in that report, there are 3 summations that were presented to us. 2 of them are incorrect. So one of those sums is off by more than $3,000 and the other one a little closer. However, it's still incorrect by $10. Leads me to question, how do we trust that these estimates are given to us that are correct when these simple calculations are not correct? And then Emil, you want to take over?
Sure. Your worship, council, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Mr. Nabu, just for a minute, I know there's about 4 or 5 questions here that have been asked, so we don't lose track. And so I'd like to give, obviously, our engineers an opportunity to answer the question that Mrs. Forte has brought forward. So I don't know, Alicia or Mr. Rude.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the cost escalation was due to the inflation rates that we've experienced since the original values were provided to the owners, plus the new Ontario regulation that came into effect on January 1st of this year for excess soils handling. That also increased the overall cost for the project. The difference between the cost to the 48 parcel and other parcels can be the fact that they're near the upstream end of the drain. So they're cost sharing for the bridge is higher than downstream owners that have less contribution from, because they have less contribution from upstream owners to the Fortier parcel. And the amount then is their shares higher for the fact that they're there, plus the enclosure cost add significant cost to their final assessment that they have to bear as part of the project cost. Our estimates for each of the works is utilizing a similar spreadsheet calculation sheet, so we were not able to notice any problems or errors that we could find with regards to how the values were assessed. The costs are high, but the thing to recall is that the tender price is what will be the actual cost that will be assessed out at the end of the day. And our inflated prices from the last report is just to help make sure that when the tenders come in, that our report will be very close to what the tender prices are. And some of the adjustments we made back in final preparation of the report reflects the escalations that we had seen late last year to try and get our estimate much closer to what tender prices will be when it does finally go out.
Okay, Mr. Nebu?
Yeah, Your Worship, Council, thank you again for the opportunity. This is a very important issues for us in the neighborhood. I know Christina has opened up that nobody has called in. I did speak to all the neighborhood. Nobody wanted the work to be done. But I know today, for the purpose of this meeting, it has two items, whether we dispute the assessment and the pricing. And I see, I echo the information Victoria has provided to council. There is inconsistency with the engineering calculation. If we're looking at the description in the assessment from each property, the description is no different from mine to Victoria to Ronnie next door. So the explanation from Gerard is not convincing whatsoever, because it didn't say in the description on the property you're paying extra money because of X and Y and Z. We believe that the engineering has thrown some number out there without a justification other than verbal response today after the neighborhood has to challenge the calculation and the pricing. Victoria has done a thorough work, and if in the based on the description, the same thing. If you go to the market to buy an apple, and the apple is $1, it's a $1. It doesn't say the apple was placed that way or the other way. So I believe the engineering has been a little bit careless on how to do this. With all due respect, and we have a spreadsheet. And we believe that if each meter costs $100, it should cost $100. And if there is a variation that result in an increase in the pricing, it should be stipulated in the description in the property. That way, the property owner will be able to justify that. And with this, we do want to recall that the engineer redo the complete assessment without any additional cost. And we asking if this project, because we believe the neighborhood will be challenging and appealing this project completely, because Mr. Gerard has told us the last time that the life expectancy for the galvanized culvert, it is 30 years, and there is nobody on that road is 30 years. So I don't see the reasoning for all that work and the cooperation between all other departments, as I stated before, that the service is going to come to the road and we're going to pay the price twice. I know you guys have told me before that you assured me that the property owner will not be incurring the cost, but I think we're still going to incur the cost. So we do challenge the assessment and the engineering, and we will look for more reassessment. And we're looking for the lowest price is being done for each property based on the description they provided to us. And from there, we're waiting for the second opportunity where we will launch our appeal for the complete work, because we're looking for cooperation between departments, and we don't see any problem in our property.
Thank you, Ms. Nabu. I see your hands up, Mrs. Fortier.
Yeah, I just wanted to just comment on what Mr. Rude said. You know, if that is true that we're paying more because we're closer upstream, then in that case, the price per meter should go lower as you go closer to Weston Park, but that's not true. So we're paying the greatest cost per meter. My neighbor is paying the lowest cost per meter, and Emil and Marisa are paying more than them. So we don't see the price drop as you get further away downstream. So it doesn't make sense to me. We just need to be transparent here on where these costs are coming from.
Okay, Mr. Root, could you explain, I understand as well as under the difference, you know, whether it's 76 or 78 or 40, whatever, the different portions of the Drainage Act itself and the definition of what's upstream, downstream. And I mean, water flows at a head to the lowest point and so forth. And why the, I mean, these numbers in terms of flow rates and so forth, they're not something that just comes out of somebody's head. It's actually, you know, the right calculations that that engineers use in how the water flows. And the other portion in terms of costing as well is that in closing, obviously, there's additional costs to that. And usually those are borne by, correct me if I'm wrong, by the homeowner within that area. And so that would be kind of an additional cost. But could you just verify in terms, because it's, you know, especially for lay people to try to understand, you know, the drainage and how you calculate it and so forth, why there's a difference, and you know, from the start point or at the head of versus the outlet.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what we do is we do the estimates for the construction costs. All of the structures that are put in also have their share of incidental costs based on their total cost for the construction of the works. So the cost sharing for the bridges is based on the location of the bridge or enclosure along the length of the drain. With the bridge enclosures at the upper end, the owner bearing a higher cost because there is less upstream areas contributing to flows, and the sizing of that bridge culvert enclosure pipe that is being provided for the parcel that's affected. The other factor that comes into play on assessment is the owner's share of costs for the open drain portions, repair and improvements. And again, the owners at the upstream end there pay a higher cost because they have to take their flows all the way down through the entire length of the drain to what is judged as the sufficient outlet for the drainage works. So upstream owners are typically experiencing that higher cost. I also verify, like you mentioned, that any enclosure costs are always assessed 100% to the owners for anything beyond the standard 6.1 meter top width that is shared by other upstream lands and roads for any access bridges that are constructed. So any additional top width and cost of enclosure lengths all goes 100% to the affected owners that have requested that works to be done on their behalf.
Thank you, through Alicia, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Forte and Mr. Naboo. Ms. Forte, to your point about that you saw the $16,100 in the one report, which I believe was at the PIC held in March of last year. That was for an open drain portion, and I believe to just replace the culvert under your driveway. After that meeting, you emailed Mr. Rude that you would like to see an estimate for an enclosure for the front of your property for that drain. And Mr. Rude gave you the same price that's in the report of $21,800. And from there, you asked Mr. Root to proceed with the full enclosure design of the drain. Now, when you go to the assessment schedule and your assessment is higher than the $21,800. The $21,800 is construction costs. The other costs are incidentals that are brought forward. And I did the math today. And when you bring those incidentals forward, my price that I got was around 24,000, which is shown in the report. So again, if you didn't ask Mr. Rood for that enclosure, then your price would have probably stayed around the 16,100. Probably would have gone up a bit because of inflation. As Mr. Rood stated, he did take that into consideration so that when we do go to tender the work, it's not that far off from our tender results. And to Mr. Naboot's point that the engineer was careless and that he just threw out a number, Mr. Rood has been doing this for, I would say, over 30 years. And he doesn't just throw out numbers, they're carefully looked at and calculated for this, as he has to do under the Drainage Act and also as a professional engineer. And for him to go back and do the report at no cost is just not feasible, as well as he's putting his time into that. So someone is going to pay for that and it's going to be put back onto the drain for that. But as he said, he's looked at it, he's given fair assessments. You have also requested an enclosure. We discussed that at the meeting to consider as to why your costs have gone up, because you did request an enclosure. Again, that costs more money. So when you do enclose a pipe, you're going to need a catch basin to collect that water to get into the pipe. Whereas if you had an open drain, then the water can freely flow into that open drain portion. If you want to appeal, that is your right under the Drainage Act. However, I believe I've given you an explanation as well as Mr. Rood as to how these prices have come up and where they come from. Thank you.
Thank you. Listen, okay, I've got two hands here. I'll go first. Go ahead, Ms. Forte, please.
Okay, and that's understandable. However, it's not reflected in the report in any way.
Well, it's at the catch basin.
The catch basin is there, but the rest of that explanation is not. So, you know, we just want to verify that that's the case. In any case, if you're looking, you know, you should see the rates drop as you go more downstream. It's just not happening. The rate drops and then rises again. So it's just, it doesn't make sense. And all three have catch basins. All three properties, one next to the other, all have catch basins. The pricing, it doesn't seem to be going lower as you go away from as you go downstream. It doesn't seem to be driving with what we're hearing.
Go ahead, Mr. Rood.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The other factor that comes into play as you go downstream is there's more flow going into the pipe from the roadway and abutting properties. So some of the pipe sizing increases as you go downstream. And so their share of cost sharing is lower, but the cost of doing the works with the larger size pipes that are required also increases their cost for downstream areas. And overall, the costs are kind of balanced for every parcel by using that variation in cost sharing based on the location of the structures along the full length of the drain.
Mr. Nabu?
Yes, again, echo what Victoria has said. If you go in the upper stream and you got to pay more money in a lower property like mine, the price should be much lower. And again, we follow in the description. Engineer, when they submit a report and there is an additional cost that needs to be specified in that report, you could through all explanation you want. You have done the work and you're charging the taxpayer the money. And you haven't illustrated why we're paying the money other than now we are challenging the calculation of the engineering. So, and for saying that because we're challenging and putting a fact out there and that is calculation, if we are requesting reassessment, we're going to bear the additional cost for the assessment. If you make a mistake, you pay for it. It's not up to me because I'm bringing out an issue, I'm factual, and based on just the explanation you just give, my property should be way less than what you just stated. So if the upstream pay more money because the work and the flow and whatever the issue you may describe, mine is the second or the third property after Victoria and my mother-in-law way after, we should be paying way less money than what it is. We follow in the description on your report, and with your description on the report stating the work, and we took the cost and we make comparison, we see a great inconsistency. And so if the decision is to do recalculation, I don't think we should bury in the cost of the recalculation and assessment. It's the engineering should be bearing the cost for not being looking after. I do respect that the fact is being brought that he's an engineer doing the work. Everybody can do a mistake, but the property owner should not be burying the mistake of somebody. And we do believe there is inconsistency. And if I'm going down the stream, I should be paying less based on his statement that he made today. So once again, I thank you, but we believe there is inconsistency. And if you want to through a lot of things just because we're challenging the fact that the report was not accurate, and then the description you send it to each property owner should stated all those variation that we are able to understand.
Well, first and foremost, I do believe in terms of the professionalism of our engineers. I mean, they have a reputation and they have a stamp, and that stamp is their sign, their seal. And obviously, on the other side, if we were to do nothing or very little, and circumstances would change, there'd be floods or other issues, well, guess who's responsible? Then it's a municipality has a responsibility to make sure that when the engineers do the reports, they do investigate it. They did go out. They put their reputation on the line, Mr. Nabut. So I don't agree in terms of saying, that they make mistakes on an ongoing basis. That would be that'd be false, and certainly in that regards. But having said all that, if you do have obviously your concerns in terms of the fairness and so forth, the next stage is the tribunal, and you can go through the tribunal, to state obviously your case that you believe that the report for whatever reason in your estimation is wrong or mistakes have been made. But I do believe when you look at the professionalism of the engineers on the act, they've done everything that they can, and certain amount of costs as well as I think our drainage superintendent alluded quite well in terms of when you ask for additional coverage in terms of the enclosure and so forth, that's borne in 100% by yourself as the landowner. And so with that, I certainly, the only thing I can tell you is that I certainly support the engineer's report, and in terms that is done as equitably and as possible. And so they've had the opportunity to look at it. The inflationary piece is an actual fact of life in terms of many of our projects that we're doing right now in terms of the municipality. We've seen some of them as high as 30% increase. in infrastructure within, within our municipality. And so again, if you feel strongly that it is, that you feel there's mistakes in there is another process, and it's through the tribunal. Yeah, and maybe Alicia, if you could explain that to our delegation.
Thank you, Your Worship. Definitely. There's two ways you can appeal to tribunal. One way is through section 48(1) of the Drainage Act. And that is when you appeal based off of you don't agree with the engineer's report. The other way is through section 54(1) of the Drainage Act, and that is on the decision of the Court of Revision. So if you want to appeal the tribunal for the engineer's report, you have within 40 days from the date of the notice of the Court of Revision, which I believe is March 14th, if I'm not mistaken. And then under section 54(1) of the Drainage Act, if you wish to appeal based off of the decision of the Court of Revision, you have within 21 days. I believe it's from the notice, or it's from, oh no, it's from the, so today, you have within 21 days to appeal the tribunal based off this decision today. If you'd like more information about that, you can email me or give me a call, and I will be more than happy to give you all the information that you need. Thank you.
Mrs. Fortier?
Yeah, I just want to add that we fully understand that we're responsible for that cost. I'm not disputing that at all. It wasn't very transparent. It wasn't in the report. However, even on the last year's report, we brought the same issue forward. It was still an issue on the February 2022 report that we got. And we understand we can go to the tribunal, but we're already seeing that we're being threatened of increasing our cost to $24,000, right? So I'm just wondering if you're, asking us not to go to tribunal.
Yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Forte. We're not asking you not to go to tribunal. If you wish to go to tribunal, that is your right under the Drainage Act. Keep in mind, though, that tribunal is not run by the municipality. It is their own judicial system. So they will set their court times and dates and all things like that. In terms of not being set out in the report, it does say enclosure, whereas the other ones are just bridges. So I will say that in terms of like how it's written, that is something that Mr. Rood can attest to and how he does his reports. If you wanted that to be spelled out better for you, then that would be to Mr. Rood. I think he did a good job of explaining to you when you did want your enclosure, what that was going to be and your costs associated. But in terms of the report, that would be to Mr. Rood to address that. Thank you.
I think that would be a good recommendation, and certainly, to your benefit, Ms. Fortier, I know you weren't here the original meeting and so forth, so that may be an opportunity for so you can have that, so some dialogue, obviously, with the engineer, and to kind of give you some guidance here as well. But so it's not, we're trying to tell you what you should do in the next step. That's entirely up to certainly to yourself, but certainly I think a little bit more dialogue with the drainage engineer, I think would go a long way. Go ahead, Councillor Jobin.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. To just clarify to Ms. Forte, you want the enclosure or do not want the enclosure? And so what you're asking is if you could just respond to that, you want it enclosed or do not want it enclosed?
Yeah, we want the enclosure, right? However, even not like disregarding their enclosure and other properties who also have the enclosure, the rates still don't make sense. In the explanation, right? According to Mr. Rude's explanation, when we have exactly the same work description on 3 different properties, and you're saying that as you go downstream, that the cost should decrease, that is not what's happening. So we're just requesting more transparency. That's all we're requesting. I understand that I asked for the covering. I know that, and I do have that email. Yes, that's true, and I understand that that's our cost. We're just looking for transparency as to why it's not following the description that Mr. Rude gave us. The pipe sizing is identical between the 3 properties in the report. The whole work description between the 3 properties are identical. If the difference is the distance, upstream versus downstream, we should see a linear change. We should see that it goes lower and lower as you go towards the western part. So we're just requesting some transparency. This is a lot of money. This is for, in our case, almost $22,000. And we believe that we deserve to be heard, and we deserve an explanation as to what this work is, more than what's been given to us.
And I think there's an opportunity to get more information to you, from the engineer itself, so that you get maybe a full understanding, what exactly the full requirements of dealing with a very complex act, no doubt. And so I'm sure that the engineer can help you, guide you a little bit in terms of explaining a little bit more or at length in terms of what the requirements are and why the numbers are what they are. And it's you're right. I mean, that's why we're here and having a conversation, and we certainly want to make sure that you have a full understanding in terms of exactly the where, the why, the how, and how come, and so that you feel comfortable in terms of the information. Mr. Nabut?
Yes, I don't want it to appear that personal attack on Mr. Rude. That's not the point I'm trying to make. Is we just going based on the report and factual information presented to us. Nobody challenging his stamp and his ability as an engineer. That's not our issues. Victoria and actually her husband Adam both are certified engineer, and they carry the same stamp, and that's why we look at the report in pretty detail, and we digest the information and we try to get a clarification. I don't appreciate the fact that because we bring this information forward, that we're going to be carrying additional costs if we ask them for reassessment. So again, the second point I'm trying to make is because it looked like every time we asked those questions from the last meeting and this meeting, it seemed that we requested the enclosure. The only reason we ask, we would like to have the enclosure, because we were told initially, it doesn't matter what we do, they are going to do the work. And we ask, and that way we avoid in the future additional costs. But we are not in agreement at all that this work require. I understand the Drainage Act. I understand the municipality. That's why the last meeting we asked if this is necessary. In the worst time in the history of our country was the economy and inflation, you download all this inflation on a property owner in the worst time. And yet we're trying to bring a point forward based on the report. And we've been told if we need a reassessment, we're going to bear the additional cost. That's not fair. So I think it's worth taking that is those points that is being brought forward by 2 professional engineers and myself is not being in the initial report, and the calculation is not quite accurate and the description is not quite accurate, then the assessment need to be done fairly. And if we're looking for the lowest cost. Anyhow, my third question is if we're going to proceed with the appeal, is this going to go through the town, or you want us to proceed right to the tribunal?
Well, at this stage here, the court revision is at that point where we have to move forward and deal with the work at hand. I think it was explained quite well by the drainage engineer, you know, in that regard. So it seems you pushing the issue that mistakes have been made and so forth. I don't think they are. I mean, it is what it is, but you have those two options under the act on the two provisions. I think I can have Alicia certainly say it again. I think under section 48.1, is that the right one? And
54.
54. And, you know, in that regards, I mean, obviously the other thing to remember is that, you know, to go ahead and redo reassessments and so forth, people don't work for nothing. You know, it's already been reassessed and redone, and to say, okay, just go ahead and do it. There's a lot of hours and time and everything and effort that have been put in to develop the document itself, and to say, well, you know what, we can redo it and reassess. There's dollars, and then that would be incurred by all of the folks on the drain, and so that's not free, and those are costs that are going to be borne by the individuals, and it seems that are we going to continue to reassess and reassess? I think the engineers have done, I think, a great job in trying to make this as equitable as possible. And as time marches on, inflation does play a role, and so we need to look at you know, and think about that as well. Go ahead, Councillor Jobin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the delegates tonight, I don't want to see you go through an appeal process, because there will be delays. And like the mayor stated, there's going to be an inflation cost again associated. It's construction works. And again, the document is estimates, and estimates over a year will change with inflation, like Mr. Nabut expressed. Construction companies have all increased a number of estimates through a number of projects throughout the municipality. I would like to ask if Mr. Rood could, instead of us going through additional processes, just an amendment to the report on their assessment, not do a full assessment, just decipher their assessment in the report, specifying the additional costs. And if we can maybe even give them some literature or language on the assessments of how properties are assessed from the higher location of a drain to the lower location of a drain. I want to see them get the information they're looking for without having to go through an appeal process.
Am I correct that you've already gave the numbers, or you have numbers?
Yes. So when they requested the enclosure from Mr. Rood, he gave them the numbers that appear in the report. So those are the construction numbers. When you get to the assessment schedule, the incidentals are brought forward, and that is the number that's shown under special benefit in the assessment schedule.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Auger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure what this court's pleasure is at this point, but if it's the pleasure of this court to confirm the assessment as presented and recommend that the bylaw proceed to council for third reading, I would ask that a formal resolution be put on the record.
Okay, any further questions or certainly comments from the court? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just quickly through you. I just, to Councillor Jobin's point, I want there to be a possibility for them to get answers to these questions without having to go through an appeal process. Is that possible? Is there dialogue that can continue between if we approve this tonight and it for this, is their only option to go to an appeal now? Or can there be further dialogue that happens between themselves and either Mr. Rood or our own town for there to be answers to those questions so that those can be satisfied in a way that informs their next steps?
Well, I did make the, observation earlier to have, conversation because you got 21 days that are there. But to reassess one or the other, I mean, then it affects the whole pie, so to speak. And I think it's more of explaining why and the numbers are what they are. And I did suggest to have, more conversation between now and the 21 days. That makes sense with the engineers, but you can't reassess bits and pieces of it because it affects the whole, the whole assessment, so for example, if one was to go down, the other one goes up and so forth, yeah, maybe neutral, but say they both go down, then the cost of doing the whole drain might change and then the others will go up. And so we have to be sensitive and cognizant of that fact. But in the information in terms of the where, the why, and the original, just the shaping of the drain versus the enclosure and so forth, what those costs are, and the numbers in over a year, like the CPI normally in construction, and I'm going to look at John, it's probably 7, 8, 9% per year. That's what it used to run at, and in the last 18 months, 2 years, we've seen, 25, 30 and 35%. So to Councillor Jobin's point earlier, I mean, construction costs, they march on and so forth. So and the other piece to also look at is they can't just start when they want. I mean, there's ocean and fisheries, there's a whole host of things where there's a period during the year where they can actually do the work. And so forth. Spring is not the time, if I'm not mistaken. It's usually dry times when they expect to to be able to do this. So there's a whole host of things that we have to consider, moving as we move forward. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Forte or Forte, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And, all we're asking is for some transparency. That is all we're asking. But I do want to add that only 3 properties, only 3 residents estimates went up. And those are the 3 that we're discussing right now. All the other estimates have stayed exactly the same. So when we're talking about increase in the cost of construction, I question that for one. And it's still at this point, we're just looking for transparency and a reasonable explanation as to why the rates are not dropping, as you go downstream. Like, I still haven't got a clear answer on that. All we're asking for is transparency. We understand it's a great deal of money for us, and we understand of the delay of the project. However, I don't want to be blamed for delaying the project because I'm questioning something because it has not been properly explained to me. I don't think that's fair to say in front of the town here now that we're live streaming.
No problem. I think that, as I alluded to Ms. Forte earlier, that we'll make sure that our drainage engineer gets in contact with yourself and to give you that explanation that you're looking for, so that you have some comfort level and knowing that it is transparent in terms of what we're doing, and you'll have certainly that comfort level, that we've done that. So open to the additional communications. I don't want to put put pressure on the drainage engineer, but we'll certainly be in contact with you and to set up a meeting and have the opportunity to have an athletic explanation. Okay, members, any questions now? Just a motion as alluded from, could you read that again, Mr. Ogier? And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That the quarter revision confirm the assessment as presented and recommend that the bylaw proceed to council for third reading.
Councillor Tonio moves and Councillor Dorner support on the motion. All in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. And this was basically Shuttleworth drain. There was no delegations on board for the Sullivan drain. Okay, so we'll need a motion for it, do we? Yep. Okay, read. And I got it here. I probably do. Okay.
That the quarter revision confirm the assessment as presented for the Sullivan drain and recommend that the associated bylaw proceed to council for third reading.
Councillor Higginson move. Councillor Tonio support. All in favor? Oppose? That is carried. Okay. Sullivan drain, probably known as that. Okay, move communication. Councillor Tonio, Councillor Higginson moves communications. All in favor? Oppose, if any, that is carried. And no further business. I certainly want to thank both the Fortiers and Mr. Nabut for your delegations here today, and also to our drainage engineers who also are participated in the meeting. So without further ado, adjournment is now in order. Councillor Jobin and Councillor Dorner on the motion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.